Well folks, I was wrong. I made a video yesterday and I said that the Ballidorse Wrathweaver exotic gauntlets for the warlock didn't buff stasis weapons in a Well of Radiance. And while my testing definitely showed that it didn't, it turns out that it actually can stack with other buffs. I just didn't test it properly. So before we go any further, I just want to say I definitely did not purposely spread misinformation. I did my testing with one other friend and showed you guys the results. And I want to thank the YouTube commenters who told me otherwise. It turns out that it does stack with Well, just not if you're the person that casts the Well of Radiance. This is honestly critical information for the day 1 raid in my opinion, because this damage buff is pretty significant. So I spent a whole bunch of time testing today, and I want to give a big shout out to Will and Naoli for all their help for being the guys to apply the buffs. I appreciate it very much. And anyways, we found out some big things. So in this video, I'm going to show you what's up and how you can get more than a 200% damage boost on your stasis weapons. So let's jump into it. So in yesterday's video, I said how it was disappointing that the new warlock gloves didn't stack with Well, as it was a very niche situation and you were using a non-damage super to get said buff, so it would be nice if it helped out your fire team more than it does. The damage buff from the shockwave of the super is 15% to all your stasis weapons, but unlike most buffs in the game, this actually stacks with things like Well of Radiance and Lumina. Well is a 25% damage buff and Lumina is a 35% buff. So in a 6-man raid setting, that extra 10% can be quite significant, especially because you can apply the buff and then fire off rockets or linear shots depending on what the Lumina user is using for a heavy weapon. So with this exotic, you can now buff your allies' stasis weapon damage a further 15% with your shockwave. So that is a 55% damage buff to their stasis weapons. But the buff stacking doesn't stop there. You can also use a boss spec for an additional 7.7% damage to bosses. Carl is a major, so I was using major spec to show the difference in damage. You can apply boss and major specs to any legendary weapon, but not to exotics. And then for more buffs, we have the new surge system. All tests with surge were done with 3 stasis surge mods, so that the damage is an extra 22%. If you don't know how these stack, I made a video on it, so you can watch that if you need more information. So let's add up all our buffs. We have 35% from Lumina, 15% from Wrathweaver's Shockwave, 22% from surge mods, and 7.7% from a spec mod. This is a 2.04x damage increase, so basically double damage. But wait, there's more. If you have a weapon with a damage increasing perk itself, then that will add even more damage. For this test, I used a Bump in the Night with Frenzy, and my rocket hit for 2.18x damage with Frenzy procced. For this test, I had major spec on both times, that is why it is 2.18x. But if I didn't have major spec on the base damage, it would actually be a 2.34x damage multiplier. And this will work on any stasis weapon like a Reed's Regret or a Thoughtless Sniper Rifle with firing line. Vorpal is a 10% buff on a Reed's Regret, so that is a good option too. The point is here, you can get a lot more damage as all of these buffs stack. However, you have to take one member effectively out of the damage phase to be able to accomplish this, so is it really worth it? Well, it's hard to say, so let's break it down. Say you are in a damage phase and everyone is ready to go. You have 6 players. One casts a Well and has Lumina and is using a Bump in the Night. Another player has a Galahorn and the rest are all running bumps as well. The damage buff they will receive would be 35% from the Lumina, 22% from the Stasis Surge, and you have 6 players all dealing that 64.7% extra damage. 1.647 times 6 is 9.882. So now, say you have a warlock with the Wrathweavers. You now have 5 players to deal damage essentially, and one that is just proccing the shockwave, dealing pretty small damage. But the rest deal 15% more. Only that isn't totally true. The player who casts the Well does not seem to get the buff for some reason, at least in the testing I did, which is why I was wrong in my video yesterday. So 4 players are dealing 89.4% more damage. 1.894 times 4 is 7.576, and the 5th player is dealing 1.647x from just Stasis Surge and Lumina, so that is 9.223, which is lower than 9.882. But we didn't factor in that the 6th player who is just proccing their super and giving the Wrathweavers buff, that super does do increased damage with the gloves on. I broke down all the numbers in the video if you're curious for how much exactly. However, the super doesn't last very long if you are casting your ice bolts to deal damage on the boss. Also, the stasis weapon timer cannot be refreshed. It lasts for 15 seconds, and then you need another shockwave to get the boost re-procced.
Damn, 9,700 to the head.
Oh.
Jesus.
That's actually crazy. Oh, and now it's only 87. What the? Oh.
What?
Oh, maybe. Oh,
What?
that's right. He can't reproc. So when it goes away.
I can't reproc it?
No.
Is it just...
So there's a 15-second timer, and when
Uh-huh.
that goes away, then you can reproc it. But if I have like 3 seconds left on it, say, and you do the thing, it won't reproc. It's the stupidest thing.
So the Warlock has two options. They can keep casting their ice bolts and deal damage and get back in the fight to deal DPS, or they can just apply the shockwave over and over to buff their teammates once more before their super runs out. This will give them all 15 more seconds of damage. Now, a 30-second damage phase is quite long, so the latter option may not be necessary, but the Warlock could fire off their super and then deal a bunch of damage to the boss, so it is sort of neck and neck really. But there is also a third option. You could have someone running Egger's Scepter, which will freeze the boss over and over, allowing the Warlock to get off a bunch of shatter damage from their super without needing to cast ice bolts. So this would allow the Warlock to stay in their super even longer to deal more damage thanks to the exotic gauntlets buffing said damage. It doesn't need to be Egger's Scepter either. Someone could run a Chill Clip Bump in the Night to apply freeze to the boss, or even a Deliverance with Demolitionist and Chill Clip, provided the boss isn't too far away out of fusion rifle range. We could go over hypotheticals for days, honestly. There are so many situations. Look at Rulk for instance. He's a mobile boss, so you could have the Warlock casting their shockwave to buff everyone's damage, and if you don't use a Well of Radiance at all, that 5th player would also get the damage boost. Like, if it was a mobile boss like the Kel Echo in the Prophecy Dungeon, you would just keep proccing Lumina on your teammates as you kill adds, and no need for a Well to get your damage boost. So what is the verdict here? Well, it's kinda hard to say. Like in so many cases, it is situationally dependent. But if it was a quick like 15-second damage window, say like the Spire boss but with 6 people, then I think this could be worth it. Your fire team would all get an extra boost to their damage and the Warlock wouldn't have to worry about extending their super. They could just expel their super and deal damage. Meanwhile, you could have a Starfire Warlock with a Demolitionist Frenzy bump in the night, absolutely pumping out damage with their grenades and their juiced up rocket launcher. It would be huge DPS. The Hunter could tether for an additional 30% debuff and run 6 Coyotes so they could shoot a rocket, dodge, shoot a rocket, dodge, shoot a rocket, throw a grenade, shoot a rocket. And then you could have a Titan on Gallahorn to buff the Warlock and Hunter legendary rocket launchers. Or you could even run Anarchy with a Deliverance fusion rifle with Cornered and Surrounded on it. Obviously the encounter would need enemies around you for that to be good, but it is a lot stronger than you think. I actually made a video detailing the damage numbers if you are curious. But these are all just hypothetical situations like I mentioned. The point of the video was more to show off the crazy extra damage your stasis weapons can do if someone is running this exotic. Again, a base DPS phase would have a Well and Surge mods to give 52.5% more damage. If you really want to be sweaty, you run Lumina to take that damage up to 64.7%, which is definitely worth it in my opinion. And then if you want to go crazy, everyone would run stasis weapons and one person have the Ballidorse Wrathweavers on and get an additional 15% to crank up the damage to 89.4%. Almost double damage. The spec mods actually push you over double damage. And then, as I mentioned before, the weapon damage increasing perk is just icing on the cake. Anywhere from 10% with Vorpal to 20% with Firing Line. Good luck getting Adrenaline Junkie or Golden Tricorn, but those would be even more. Anyways, that is it for the video. Sorry I messed up in the exotic breakdown video yesterday. I did my best and I learned from my mistake. Hopefully this video helped you out and was informative, and if it was, then a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. And keep sounding off in the comments if you know of things that I or other YouTubers miss. This is how we learn. We are only human and we're doing the best that we can. I wish Bungie would add a testing zone so that we can test everything much more easily and compare things apples to apples, but I'm probably just dreaming. Anyways, if you made it this far, then thanks so much for watching. Happy damage testing, Guardians, and take care.